I hated yoga when I first found it. Yoga was inviting me to connect to my body in a way that had me get in touch with my anxiety. And I didn't know how to do that. So I had to like run out of that yoga class. But in my mind, I was like, there's something there. Now I look back and I go, they were doing somatic work there. They were helping us connect to our bodies and our nervous systems and regulate it.
How many times do you go to a therapist, sit down and talk about the same thing and find that there's not really improvement in your life? And how many times is it going to take before we realize that talking will not get to the root of mental health issues? And when we understand that the root of these mental health issues actually lies in the body, that's when transformative change begins. On this episode of Heal Thyself, Hala Khouri, a somatic-based therapist, comes on this show to talk exactly that. We cover topics like, why isn't anxiety being addressed at the root? Why is it so hard to make strong, long-lasting connections? Why do we feel disconnected and lonely more than ever? And how to start connecting with the root, which is in your body. Hala's an expert in somatic therapy. She's passionate about social injustice. She's an adjunct professor at Pitzer College, and she's the co-founder of Off the Mat Into the World and the author of a new book, Peace from Anxiety: Get Grounded, Build Resilience, and Stay Connected amidst all of the chaos. If you feel like you've been doing therapy for years and you know deep down inside there's something more in there, this is the episode for you. We're going to uncover, unwrap, and expose what's in there and what to do about it. Thank you for joining this episode of Heal Thyself. To support the show, please rate, review, and subscribe. It gives us the opportunity to really expand this knowledge to people who need it most, and you can do your part by just sharing the love. Again, thank you for listening. I'm forever grateful, and I love you all. Let's get started. Okay, so look, you go on Instagram, you go on Facebook, all of a sudden there's the word somatics. And everybody is kind of being pulled towards this word, but doesn't really fully understand what does it mean, the world of somatics, and how is it implicated in mental health. And so I want to establish a foundation, and what better person to have someone who is in that world, deep in the world. And what is it about somatics that is so attractive now in the state of mental health?
Gosh, there's so much I could say about that. We were talking before about my own journey towards finding somatics. And I know for me, from a really young age, I wanted to study psychology. I wanted to understand what motivates people. Like, why are my parents so messed up? Like, why is the world so messed up? And I thought that the doorway into that was understanding the mind, right? And so in college, I was studying psychology, and it was really dissatisfying to me. And I didn't know why. I often, when I talk about my journey, I say I can look back now and retell that story. And I look back and I realize it's because it was disembodied. I was being taught that we are our thoughts and our behaviors. And if we can change our thoughts and behaviors, then we can reduce our level of suffering. To some extent, that's very true. And nobody was talking about what's happening in the nervous system, what's happening in our bodies. And I was sort of a typical college girl. I had issues around food, issues around my body image. I had a lot of anxiety, and I could analyze all of it, and it didn't change how I felt in my body. And so in my own journey, first I found it through yoga, where I was like, oh, what is that thing where you breathe and you move and, oh, you have to feel your body. I hated yoga when I first found it. Again, now I know yoga was inviting me to connect to my body in a way that had me get in touch with my anxiety. And I didn't know how to do that. So I had to like run out of that yoga class. But in my mind, I was like, there's something there. Now I look back and I go, they were doing somatic work there. They were helping us connect to our bodies and our nervous systems and regulate it. So this world of somatics is a really broad world, right? It's a world of, when it's done skillfully, helping people find home in their bodies again. And when we want to find home in our bodies again, it means we have to confront all the things that we were trying to escape: the terror, the pain, the emotions we didn't know how to process. So in a broad sense, somatics is an approach that helps us understand that the mind lives in the body, that what's happening in our nervous system in regards to trauma or stress impacts how we think and how we act. And if we don't address that, healing can feel like it's only surface level.
And I feel like there a lot of people have been going to look for healing and it's only been surface level. So they're kind of looking for what else can I do? And you mentioned back then
Mhm.
they weren't really talking about somatics. What was the overarching approach for mental health? And at what point did you notice a shift in sort of like the consciousness going, hey, wait, there's this bottom up, as you talk about so many times, approach that might be even more impactful?
Yeah, so back then it was cognitive behavioral therapy, which again works. There's evidence. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful therapy, right? But that was sort of the main thing. And it's easy to study methodologies that have like really clear pathways. And there were limits to that. And I know that when I was studying psychology 25 years ago, we didn't have somatics yet. We had programs in depth psychology and counseling psychology, but I had all these professors that were doing somatic work on the side. And, if you were at a conference on trauma and you talked about the body, people would think you were like a quack. It was like, oh, who are those weird people? And so I sort of like secretly was studying somatics, just knowing intuitively based on my studies and my experience that it was that next level. And that's what my teachers were saying. And so I feel like in the last 15 years, things have really, really changed. Now you can go get programs in somatics. There's lots of different modalities out there that we are seeing work and are starting to be evidence-based. So I don't know that it's like fully in the mainstream. I think probably for
Yeah.
some of our listeners, it's a brand new idea. It's definitely cutting edge, but it's not so new that we don't know that it works. Like, I think we have enough experience with it now to see the impact of somatics. And again, when it's done well and skillfully in supporting people to regulate their nervous systems. And sometimes it's done in combination with other therapies. Absolutely, right? There isn't one way to heal, but this is a really important component.
So then the people viewing listening, they go, well, what about somatics? What is it with my body? Let's say they never even read any books on somatics or don't understand. Well, I go in because I'm anxious and I want to talk about my anxiety and move through this. Isn't that the way to do it? What is the paradigm and belief and approach in somatics that is different from let's talk about this in a mental plane?
Yeah. So let's take anxiety as an example, right? I used to have anxiety. And so I've had my own journey with dealing with anxiety. And so I spent a lot of time talking about it. I could dissect my family history. I
Right.
understood it in my rational mind, but my anxiety wasn't going away. And so somatics is an approach that says, all right, how does that anxiety feel in your body? Oh, my heart is racing, my gut is tight. And somatics invites us to, number one, connect to our sensations. Understand that with trauma or toxic chronic stress, we're holding those things in our body. And if we're not connecting to our body, we don't realize it. So we're doing all these behaviors to actually avoid what we're feeling. And oftentimes the behaviors that we do to avoid the discomfort in our bodies are the problem. Things like alcohol, drugs, work addiction, being in toxic relationships. Those are ways that we behave that on some level are coming from that dysregulation and that trauma. So if I say, all right, I'm going to face the core of what I'm feeling. I'm going to face, oh my God, I'm anxious. I'm worried that everyone's going to die or whatever my
Yeah.
anxiety tells me. And instead of trying to understand it, I just sit with it in my body. What can happen is that my nervous system, the part of our physiology that either moves us towards pleasure and healing or away from pain and danger, right? When that part is dysregulated or uncalibrated wrong, we don't have connection to our guidance system, which is our bodies, right? And so embodied practices help us reclaim our instrument, which is our body. And so if suddenly I'm not afraid of the sensation of anxiety, I can get to a deeper level of what it's about. And different modalities cope with that differently, right? So in the way that I work, by learning to stay with the discomfort, I can start to release and discharge that energy. Animals in the wild do this. Indigenous cultures did this. This is in some ways cutting edge and it's very ancient.
Yeah.
All of our ancestors had practices of connecting to their bodies, the parts of them that felt wild or out of control, so they could move that energy. So I feel like I'm giving you a really long-winded answer.
No, I want this answer. This is
Okay,
good because
okay.
you're really bringing us through that journey of like, I love the part that you said this is ancient and we lost that disconnect. Does that mean then that we are biologically set to know how to move through this, but sort of forgot or moved away from it?
100%. I think that it is in our nature to be in our bodies, to connect to what we're feeling, and to release and heal it. A really big piece of that is not just somatics, it's community, right? So we are wired to like be in ritual space, be together, singing, dancing, all those things that through hundreds of years of colonization and white supremacy got squelched in folks, right? And so when we think about this trauma of colonization, for example, right, where everybody had to conform to standards of whiteness, of what normal meant. Normal meant you looked like you had your shit together. Can I cuss on your podcast?
Yes, for sure.
You look like, and that indigenous people that had these practices were wild. They were savage. They were to be controlled, right? We all carry that in our body. So even for white folks with European ancestry, they had indigeneity in their lineage way before. Their people just became the oppressors, right? So we all have this wisdom in our bodies, and we see this through animals, right? Animals that deal with traumatic situations. When there's space, they shake and they tremble and they moan and they release it from their bodies. We absolutely have that impulse. And many of us have been socialized out of it. We've been socialized to go, oh, no, I'm fine. And then we hold on to it versus like really checking in. What do I need to move through? What do I need to express? What do I need to feel?
So dancing around a fire, that is in itself a very powerful somatic practice you're saying that we lost touch with in community. Sound, drums, singing, voice, movement, powerful modality or therapeutic that we used to have in our, it's ingrained in us. And this buttoned up approach you're saying that maybe happened hundreds of years ago, whenever it happened, we're buttoned up and we can't release that wild side. And so you're saying that is one of the main thorns on our side as to why we're suffering with our mental health, because we're unwilded.
Yeah, we need to rewild ourselves.
Okay, so now let the person viewing and listening, they go, okay, but I work 9 to 5. I have a very buttoned up job, and then I come home and I take care of the kids. How does that woman or the man listening, the dad, this is I show up for my family. How do we rewild the everyday average American person? We obsess over our food, our water, even what we put on our skin, but we completely overlook something we consume way more, and that's air. Think about it. We breathe in about 11,000 liters of air every single day, and most of us have no idea what's actually in it. That's where Jaspr changes things. They're the first company I found that really gets how home air quality impacts everything from our sleep to our energy level. They take a really holistic approach to home. And we just had a podcast with the founder of Jaspr speaking about how people's sleep scores are jumping from the 61s to 90s overnight just by optimizing the air quality. But think about it, you're not stressing your body with breathing in poor quality air, whether it's dust, dander, mold. And it's not just about filtering the air. It's a clean environment where your body's going to truly thrive. And what I love about Jaspr is they look at the whole picture. The PM 2.5 particles that we can't see, the VOCs from cleaning products or materials in our home, and even the CO2 levels that can affect our focus. They're not here just selling air purifiers. They're actually revolutionizing how we think about the air that we breathe. And if you're ready to transform your home air and your health, go to jaspr.co/DRG and use the code DRG for $300 off. That's a limited time. That is jaspr.co/DRG, and the code is DRG. You know I'm serious about training. You know I'm serious about recovery. You know I'm serious about getting really fit. At my age, 40 years old, we want to be like I'm 20-year-old fit, right? And I learned a lot about quality supplements over my years, especially in school. And let me tell you, there's a supplement called Puori O3 Ultra Pure Fish Oil. It is the best one on the industry, okay? Best across the board. They only use small fish. They test every single batch against 200 contaminants, 200. And it's essential, especially because a lot of us have really low EPA and DHA. When I was running tests, nutritional tests on people, this was oftentimes something that was really low, and it's essential for heart health, brain health, eye health. And guess what? Overall research is also showing that EPA and DHA balance Omega-3s is really, really important for muscle recovery and strength. So if you're active, it's essential. This is a go-to that I put every morning in my little cup. 2,000 milligrams of EPA and DHA in their natural form, and it's certified both clean and sustainable. I know I'm getting the best omega-3s in the game. Puori is offering you 20% off of this fish oil, and actually all of their products. Just go to puori.com/DRG and use the code DRG at checkout. That is PUORI.com/DRG.
Yeah, I love that question. I think everybody has their different doorway. And I remember talking to somebody who had that same job, and like an intense job, had to get home to her kids. So her practice was when she got home, she would, in her car, put on a song and just sing for 5 minutes, right? Or on the way home, listen to music and sing, like it was a way to move the energy. So for folks that are really, really busy, and I work with a lot of very busy folks that are on the front lines and they have families, I talk about like, what does micro self-care look like? What are those micro moments of just pausing and connecting to your body? It can be as simple as I take a deep breath. It can be as simple as like, oh, right?
Shaking.
Like, how do we live in an embodied way? And it doesn't mean you have to go for an hour and work out or go find a fire to dance around. But be in our bodies from moment to moment. I mean, if it's new for folks, we do need spaces where we can like learn some tools for grounding or for breathing. And then eventually it can just become, I kind of liken it to like cleaning up as you go along. Like if you just pick up the socks when you put them down, the room never gets too cluttered. So how do you in your nervous system, anytime something comes up, okay, like you can stay more regulated throughout the day with these little mini practices. And for sure, sometimes we need to like go into spaces outside of our regular life to deepen it.
So easy at-home practices, singing more, dancing more?
Singing, dancing, feel your feet on the floor. Put one hand here and one hand here. Take a breath.
Chest and belly, just breathing into it.
Yeah, it can be so simple. I mean, at night sometimes when my kids are like, I've made them dinner and they're doing their homework, I put house music on in my living room. I just dance by myself in the living room.
Amazing. Amazing.
That can fix a lot.
I think about my mom. She passed away when I was in my first year of naturopathic school. She danced salsa every day while she cooked. Every day, or when she cleaned, or when she was just doing her thing. Yeah. There was always some sort of that music that was flowing through her. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, she just had all this wisdom in her body that I'm stressed because Christian is not listening when he's a little kid or something. And she's just moving through it with all of this just music flowing through her. It's incredible when I think about the wisdom, when people lean into it, how we already know kind of what our body wants to do. Yeah. But we sort of put that logic behind it going, well, maybe I need to read more onto another practice or learn another modality. When the truth is it's that wisdom is inside of us. So that person who is not honoring that wisdom, or they don't know that they have something there to honor, what happens if we're not picking up those socks on the way and the room starts getting cluttered? How does that express in human beings?
We get sick. Right? Whether it's physical illnesses or emotionally, I've met people that are like high-powered people and they've gone decades and then they get really, really sick. And I know this is what you talk about, like when your nervous system is in high alert, high cortisol for so long, how many illnesses can we trace to inflammation, to the, and whether it's like in women, we see a lot of chronic fatigue, we see these autoimmune illnesses, right? And so your body will pay eventually, right? Or the people around you.
That's right.
Or you become a horrible human being.
That's right. It started expressing out like that.
We pay for it. And a lot of people, they don't have the luxury to do that, right? So I hope that listeners don't start to feel guilty, right? Because if we haven't learned this stuff, if you're living in a high stress, high trauma situation, you might not feel like you have a space to actually do that work. But the truth is that work is not that complicated. Some of it is so simple. And I think that when we can shift our frame and really honor our nervous system and our body, we can start to build in self-care that isn't, a lot of, especially caretakers, they feel like it's so selfish, especially if people around you are in a bigger crisis than you. And I always say that the best thing we can do for those we're taking care of is be okay.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's sort of, so I heard a really good quote. They said, it's not our fault, but it's our responsibility
Yeah.
when we know about this to
Yeah.
really start making this change for ourselves and the people around us.
Mhm.
You do a lot of work with the Integrative Psych Institute, and on your Zooms, which I love,
Mm.
the way you introduce your story, and I do want to speak about that yoga lady, but you speak about these core principles of somatics to our students. What are these principles? There's only a few, but when I hear them, every time I hear them, it makes so much sense. It gives grounding to all of
Yeah.
this, like it's in the body, and all you got to do is just move this energy.
Mhm.
But what are these principles?
All right, let me see if I can remember them. So the first one is this idea is that the mind lives in the body, that we cannot separate the mind and the body, right? So Descartes said, I think, therefore I am, right? He started to bring in this idea and the Enlightenment that we are our thoughts, right? And this was really something that got built into the culture. It was a way to separate from our bodies, from wildness, from indigeneity, from the earth, right? So understanding on a brain level, right? We've got the neocortex, right? But then we got all the other parts of the brain that are innervating everything in our bodies. So we are our bodies, right? Like everything is connected. This concept that the body keeps the score, to point to the book by Bessel van der Kolk, that all of our experiences somehow leave an imprint in our bodies. Whether it's like all the things you couldn't say as a kid, well, then there's going to be energy in your throat because you didn't say those things, or the movements you didn't make. I remember having a teacher who had birth trauma, like he'd kind of come out of the birth canal in a wonky way. And he could track that when he was stressed, his body would go back into that. Like it can be that old, these patterns that we're holding. The concept of bottom up processing, right? So sometimes I'll have a client come. I remember sitting with somebody once and she booked a session with me and I checked in. I said, how are you doing? Like, what's bringing you here? And she was like, no, you know what? I'm fine. I'm great. I was like, okay. And then I just said, so just take a moment and pause and tell me what you feel in your body. And like, she took a moment and then the tears came. And then she felt the grief, right? There was so much happening beneath her awareness. And so what I love about somatic therapy is I don't have to be smarter than my clients. I just have to get them in their bodies,
Yeah.
right? Because those mental defenses, they can be so intricate and I don't have to figure out how to get around them. We just go into, what do you notice? How's your heart? How's your belly, right? And it can sound, I mean, it sounds so simple. And, even for folks that are listening, if you're kind of like, this is like wackadoodle stuff, take a moment, like, what's happening in your body right now, right?
Yeah.
Notice. So bottom up processing, right? We start from sensation or image or impulse, that we're not asking the mind to give us an analysis. We're actually going beneath that. And then sometimes we make connections, right? Sometimes we go, gosh, yeah, this heartbreak is connected to this experience I had a while ago. That's nice when we can make those connections, but we don't have to, right? Sometimes we can just release that energy from our bodies and our nervous systems are more regulated. And then we're just like more present. Like, isn't that what we want? To me, the goal of all this healing work is to be able to be present in the moment and have healthy relationships.
Which speaks so much to where we are when we seek solace for our mental health, because we kind of want to know that moment that dad XYZ or mom XYZ. Oh, by the way, in 8th grade, I remember. Now, why don't I feel better? Right?
Yeah.
We think we go for these like epiphany moments, trying to look and look and look in this logic.
Yeah.
But I love that you said that. It is literally about being more present, which ironically helps all of our relationships, because people just want to feel connected and we want to feel connected. If someone goes, okay, I'm so logical. I want to make sense of everything. Can that be a way of protecting that person from what's in the body?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, one of my therapists called it over understanding. And I loved that. I was like, I used to be an over understander. I mean, I think I studied psychology in a way because I thought if I can understand trauma, then I never have to feel it. I'm an over understander, right? I did it with my academics. I did it with my spirituality. There was a while where I was like, everything happens for a reason. I don't have to feel anything negative. Like I was one of those people. So yes, we want to avoid what's uncomfortable because no one taught us how to be with what's uncomfortable, right? And many of us don't have those tools and resources. And so I think it is our fear of what's uncomfortable that keeps us stuck in our heads.
Do you think that we are, and maybe this is just like on a spiritual level, but like, do you think that we are given people who may embody these parts of us that we are running away from in our lives, but for a good reason, for us to see that and go, I want more of that? And I know something like that happened to you.
Oh, yes, my
Mm-hmm.
first yoga teacher. Well, I do think whether we're given those people or we see those qualities, I think
Yes.
sometimes on both levels, we'll see people that represent the parts of us we don't want to feel, and we're like, oh, they're awful. Like, so that we can just point at them.
Yeah. Instead of looking. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we might get glimpses of people that have something that we want more of. And so, yeah, so when I went to my first yoga class, it was at my gym in New York. And I was in college and I would be usually on the treadmill reading my textbook, watching TV, and probably listening to music because I did not want to feel my body.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I thought I was working out, but I was such an anxious person that I didn't want to have to feel. And I saw this yoga teacher, and she was one of those, like, she was wearing like flowy white pants, and she was so chill. And I was like, what is she doing? And so I thought, all right, I want to go try her class. At the time, again, I didn't know why I was drawn to her, but now I can look back and go, oh, she was self-regulated. She was grounded. She didn't seem anxious. She was calm. And she taught this like very chill yoga class, a lot of breath work. And oh, I hated it so much, Christian. Like I was crawling out of my skin to like be so still and have to feel all the things. I was like, so I like ran out of that yoga class and got back on the treadmill. But in my mind, I was like, I want that. I don't know what that is. Now I know that, I mean, I don't know this person, but she felt really embodied. She felt grounded. I remember seeing her feet and just noticing her feet. And I think that like what most of us want is this feeling of, I feel the earth beneath me. I'm present right now. I'm not freaking out about the future or the past. And I feel connected. Nobody was telling me that. Like even in all my psychology classes, nobody was like, what do humans want? We want community. We want to be regulated. We want to feel safe. We want to feel like we have purpose. I was just learning about all the pathologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the last part, the purpose part, can you find or embody your purpose if you're an over understander or if you're in logic all the time? Because I know that to be in purpose, we already know medically that there's so many benefits to your health to kind of like wake up and want to do things in this world that are fulfilling. Is it difficult to find a purpose if your nervous system is dysregulated?
I think it is. And we live in a culture that really validates and rewards A-type personalities that are very in their head.
That's right.
So I've absolutely seen very brilliant people do amazing things and change the world. There's still a cost. I remember doing a session with a world famous cardiologist, and he came in to see me, and he's, changing the world. And it all came out of his shame, out of his childhood abuse, right? Like he carried so much shame when he wasn't doing his amazing work in the world. So yeah, you can do amazing things.
Yeah.
And what's the cost? Because if it's coming from our trauma and shame, it's not going to be sustainable. And still, the cost is your own humanity.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to. So because there are a lot of people who are shifting, making impact, but it's coming from this lack of worth, or
Yes.
being put down when they were young,
Yes.
or being celebrated when they got A pluses only.
Yeah.
But it's not
Yeah.
necessarily in their organic soul purpose.
Yeah.
So I really love that you brought that up. So then it brings us back to being a kid. It sounds to me like kids are more embodied than adults. Does it happen at a certain age where we just sort of let go and abandon those parts of us in order to like, I have to be like this at home because this is the way I have to be to survive? Do you find that that's sort of like the story, even though we don't have to go into the stories like that, but is that the story of what happens in our process?
Yeah, I think that like we come out of the womb, unless there's like heavy, pre-verbal trauma or like birth trauma, embodied. But most of us are being raised by parents who are disembodied. And so the training starts very, very young and school trains us to not be in our bodies, especially boys. So school, you've got to sit still. You can't fidget. You have to fit into a box.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of leave your body to function inside of a school system. So the conditioning starts very, very young. I often tell stories about trying to raise embodied children. It was really hard. And I have 2 boys. And, I want to acknowledge the gender spectrum. And then these are boys that carried sort of a different energy than I was used to. And they had a lot of aggression. And again, our society often doesn't give people a place to express that healthy aggression. And so I worked really hard to not shame them for what was coming up in their bodies. I remember one time my son, he was 5 and he hit his little brother and he's like, "Mommy, my body told me to do it. And you tell me to listen to my body." And I was like, well, we don't always want to listen to our bodies, right? And so how are we training kids to not have shame about their impulses and give them tools, right? And so I think it starts early on. And now with technology, it's even amplified, right? And so we see young kids being given phones or iPads, and I get it. Some parents are so stressed, they need a moment to cook or to clean or to whatever. But these devices, this technology, what it does is it makes it so we never have to feel uncomfortable. We can be distracted any moment. And so if we cannot tolerate discomfort, we are going to have a very short fuse. We're not going to be able to grow because growth happens outside of our comfort zone. So, I sometimes feel really worried about these next generations of being raised with all this technology. And I also feel hopeful because I think more of this information is out in the world.
When it comes to those little boys who become men, but not the ones who are coming from parents who are actually keeping them in their body or letting them communicate about what I'm feeling, the average man who's become disembodied or really over-understanding or logically driven, what's inside there? Are they suffering with an overarching emotion or a set of emotions? Or people you've worked with, what is the thing that is really weighing down men so much?
I think it's shame.
Shame.
I mean, I think it's across all genders, but shame for our impulses, shame for aggression, shame for these parts of us that are wild, being pathologized for that, and I especially think about men, because y'all are kind of ruining the world, but y'all also have a way to save the world, right? When we look at who are the people that are, are murderers and are creating war, right? It's men. And I think that men need a lot of healing. There's no container for healthy aggression and there's a lot of shame, right? So I think a lot of contemporary men are finding ways to connect with that part of themselves in a really healthy way. But I wonder, and I think that, and I don't work with a lot of men, but my sense is that there's not a lot of room for that, a lot of place for that. And so I think it's shame.
Then I can imagine that might be just as repressed in women who have to be put together and can't be too big, seen but not heard. I can imagine. I mean, when I would do my somatic sessions, oh my God, the woman who I knew there was something in there, but when they present, it's completely different than when they finally let go. I'm like, there's the wild Tasmanian woman that wants to come out. And for me, witnessing it, it's my favorite moment. When I see that the defenses come down and you just feel that person take oh my God, this is what I needed. Oh my God, I feel so good. And oftentimes that'll start healing a lot of the mental and physical things. In your practice, have you seen people even physically start healing? Not just the mental, but physical issues start getting better?
Yes. I think that when physical issues are treatment resistant, and again, I know this is something you talk about, if there's an underlying trauma, right, the treatments don't work. I remember having somebody come to me, had really super chronic neck pain, it was debilitating for 20 years. And she'd gotten MRIs, massage, acupuncture, everything. And so we were doing some really slow body tracking. And at one point she was turning her head and she had this memory. 20 years ago when her son was born, there were complications and the doctor had the baby over her right shoulder. And she didn't want to look. So she stopped herself from looking. And in her neck was this fear and terror about what might be happening in her child. Wow. And she'd never processed those feelings. And so in the session, we were able to connect to it. She was able to go back there, feel the feelings, and release that energy. So, she wasn't a long-term client, but I would like to believe that that could contribute then to treatments working, right?
Mhm.
You know, I think that like when you're holding something for that long, and I know this is the work you do, it still gets stuck in the cells and in the fascia. So like you need to process the emotions and the impulses, and then other modalities come in as being useful as well.
Mhm.
But until she processed the terror there, the other treatments weren't going to work.
That's right. And I bet she took all the medications and even the
Yes,
supplements and
everything.
everything.
Mhm.
But I would say pain is one of the major things that have the most dramatic effect when someone goes through these emotional processes. It's interesting because then what is pain if not just like the neurological expression of something that may be repressed if there's no structural changes, mechanical changes. So it's a really beautiful thing. I've seen a lot of skin and gut issues. Oh my God, the contraction around the belly that people hold. I mean, think about it when we're bracing ourselves from a
Yeah.
punch, but like people live like that.
Totally.
And then that goes into the whole mechanism of back to what you said, just breathing,
Yeah.
breathing right.
Yeah.
So I always tell people, all right, viewing and listening, where are you breathing from?
Right.
And a lot of people go like this with their belly sucked in and their
It's
chest
all up
comes up
here.
all the way up. It might be one of the fastest ways to just start kind of grounding yourself
Yes.
and feeling your body. One of my favorite things you just said is that patient who came to you and you calmed her from her head, brought her to her body, and she just started crying because she was
Yeah.
running away from so much.
So much.
It's incredible, and I'm so passionate about this work because you and I we see a lot of the things that, oh my God, this is a big thing that we're missing.
Yeah.
In your view, does it look like the conventional model may be expanding over time?
Absolutely. I really see that. I think that, even my son had to do some CBT treatment because he was grappling with some anxiety and my somatic methods weren't working.
Uh-huh.
and, but in the CBT was all this embodied body tracking. I was like, oh, y'all are including it, right? Like he
Yeah.
had to work with his sensations and he was working with resourcing. And so it was built into this therapy that he got, which was super, super cool.
Mhm.
Um, I'm really hopeful because it works, right? I mean, I have shared this work with incarcerated people, school teachers, therapists, kids on the streets, right? And 90% of the time people are like, "Oh my gosh," right? It makes sense when people start to tap into like reclaiming their own bodies and their own resources in their bodies. I
Yeah.
think so.
Have you ever had a patient of yours that goes, I feel like I need to change everything. I may have to leave this partner who's been abusive, or I have to leave this job. I find that when they come back to their bodies, this wisdom just starts unfolding and
Mhm.
unfolding, and it keeps informing so much of their experience. So long as they have the practice to stay in there and they integrated it,
Yeah.
they start shifting a lot of their lives. Do you notice that, like the identity of who they think they are starts changing?
Absolutely. I mean, it never happens overnight. It's
For
kind of
sure.
slow, but I have some clients that I've had for like 10, 15 years and I've just watched them. I've watched them make different choices in relationships, Relationships are such a great place to practice some of this stuff because it's about relating with people in a particular way and that can sort of it can be like a magnifying glass to your own process. So I've seen people the main thing that I see that I love is when I see people's relationships evolve and change because you can see that the more we're cultivating health in our own system, we know how to cultivate healthy relationships or draw in relationships that help us cultivate more health individually. Um, it absolutely can change your life.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Would then people viewing and listening will go, I'm in a partnership and we go into therapy and we're talking about
Mhm.
all the times we're arguing and how triggered I feel and maybe communication skills. Would it then serve those types of people to start actually feeling deeper things
Mhm.
and working together to stronger their relationship?
Absolutely. I love working with couples and having them, sometimes I'll see them talk and I'll pause and I'll be like, what do you feel in your body? Because somebody might be saying,
Yeah.
I hear you, but then they're like, my gut is tight and I feel the impulse to punch you. All right,
Right, right.
notice that. I'm
Yeah.
actually angry. So when we can get really honest about what's going on, then our communication can be a lot more authentic. Not that you need to say, like, I want to punch you, but like, it is kind of a best practice to say, and I used to do that with my partner. I'd be like, I'm noticing I really want to shame you right now for what you just did. So I'm gonna just take a breath, being really honest about. And the only way I knew I wanted to shame was I could feel it in my body. My head doesn't want to believe I'm that person.
Yeah.
Right. So also developing sort of that language in our partnerships where we can acknowledge, gosh, I am totally feeling this impulse right now and I don't want to act on it, where we're not ashamed of those things, but we sort of normalize that we have primitive impulses in our bodies, irrational things. One of my favorite things to say to clients when I ask them a question, I'll say to them, I know your answer might be irrational. I want the irrational answer, right? Because when we admit that we have these impulses that maybe don't make sense, it doesn't matter. They're still there. And we want to work with them.
Yeah. And what happens is when we want to speak about them, sometimes they get filtered so much that the ego will go, oh, well, maybe it's just not that irrational. Maybe you can rationalize it. Or maybe it's not that primitive or wild, and we can rationalize it. I know a lot of men who really want to like articulate really, really beautifully and sophisticatedly what they're feeling. That is just like, blah, it's like this deep primal thing. So imagine how strong a relationship can be if I know my partner is open and honest about what she's feeling.
Yeah.
And then I can hold space and go, okay, I honor that.
Yeah.
And imagine the permission someone may feel to be like, okay, I feel I'm in a space where the person can hold that.
Yeah.
My God, that's intimacy.
It is. And understanding that, like, I will say to folks, your feelings are real. They're just not always accurate.
Yeah.
So being able to say to my partner, I feel like blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's my truth, but it's how it feels, right? So that we can not make feelings everything either. Right. And when we can hold space for that and not take it personally, right?
Yeah.
To be like, oh, I'm having this feeling come up. I don't think it's accurate, but I have to name it because you're going to feel it in you. Whether I could pretend it's not there, I could pretend I'm not angry, but we're going to feel it. Like our bodies, this concept of co-regulation, like we are regulating with each other all the time. We are sensing what's happening in each other. And so if we're not being honest about that, but we're using the right words, it's not going to be authentic.
So if two partners are in the heat of a fight, what can we do?
So if they're in the heat of the moment in a fight, I think it's like whoever has the wherewithal to go, you know what, I don't think this is useful. Like we're both like in our primitive brains, like maybe let's step away and take a break, because I think that if we're in a fight, when you use the word fight, I think about that. Like we're both dysregulated. We're like attacking each other, right? So it's like, who can have the wherewithal to go, we need to take a pause. We need to step back. This is not a useful time,
And then just sort of like coming back to your own grounding as best as possible. And if you're learning somatic practices, do your somatic practices and imagine how different that conversation will be when at least it's more in the body, more in holding space and expression.
Yeah.
I come back to intimacy because I was away on this spiritual weekend, and some of the downloads that I was getting were the importance of being in nature. Of course, like, nature is like nature.
So healing.
But the importance of connection and intimacy, and not only just in relationships, but friendships and whatever it is that you're bringing into your life. But I kept getting this download that it's just as important as food, So I'm feeling into like a lot of people in relationships who are not getting that connection or intimacy met. They're literally starving a part of them that is so important to being healthy.
Yeah.
It's not just like the things on the outside, the working out, the eating, the biohacks and all of that. We're talking about fundamental things for the nervous system. This is food for the nervous system.
I think that's even more important than the working out and the eating.
Hell
I think it's like, we are social beings, it's like human babies. We are born 100% dependent on the attunement of our caregivers to survive. So finding places where we can be attuned to and feel that safety. Oh my gosh, years ago I read this book written by the former czar of mental health under Obama, right? And it was a book on mental health. I think it was called Healing. And I was so skeptical, like, what is this, guy going to say about healing? And is he going to talk about like drugs and all that? And, he said that, 10% of mental health is the medications and the treatments that we have. 90% is community. and that we've lost that. And it blew me away, right? That this person who is studying health on such a national scale is like, we're so isolated.
Yeah, 90%. And I remember I was researching in the community and I go, okay, what does science, the data say about community? More important than alcohol cessation, tobacco, smoking cigarettes, working out, blood lipids. I was blown away because in essence, then a doctor before all of those things should be like, do you feel connected? Do you have a confidant? Do you have people around you who you feel?
What is your support system? You know, I mean, so 2 years ago, I lost my husband. He died. And I have 2 kids, right? So they lost their dad. And we live in such deep community, you know, and as soon as I heard the news, 3 people were at my house. And for a month, we were never alone. There was food, there were people, there was dancing, there was singing, there, you know, and you know, I got to have this like deeply embodied experience of all the stuff that I teach. And I remember talking to my son's therapist because I was like, he's not crying that much. And, you know, he was an amazing father. They were so close to his dad. But therapist said, I don't think your son is traumatized by this. I mean, losing a parent is one of the biggest traumas a child can go through, right? And I think because we were surrounded and we continue to be surrounded in community, of course, my kids are impacted, right? And part of it is they're a little older, they were teenagers. But that was like, I had my own embodied, you know, people would say to me, gosh, you're being so strong. I'm like, I don't have to be strong. I am held everywhere I turn. And I continue to be held, right? So that was just such a powerful thing for me to go through, right? Such a massive trauma. But I wouldn't say it was traumatic, right? So trauma is not in the event, it's in our response to the event. And when we have resources to deal with overwhelming events, they don't necessarily have a negative impact on us.
That's right. That's true.
So that was all community.
When my mom passed away, I didn't talk about it with anyone. I was just sort of, I didn't do anything. I was just like, all right, well, I'm just going to go about my life again and, you know, just meditate and talk to her. But like, I didn't feel like I had community. So it took me like 15 years to express those emotions that were deeply repressed and not at the expense of my mental health. In between those 15 years, I developed addiction and I had physical health issues and it was really, really tough. But community is like the foundation. 3 years ago, I did this post for like 2022, most important things for health. Number 1 was community. I want to do it every year and just reestablish how important this is. So then naturally people are going, okay, well, I live in the middle of Boise, Idaho. Well, it's actually
Boise's
more up and coming. I was about to say, I don't know where Bismarck. Okay. And they go, I like have like one friend maybe. How do we actually bring more community to ourselves to better our mental health? Is there things that we can do?
I want to uplift a really beautiful book by Mia Birdsong called How We Show Up. And she really gives people steps on like how to deepen our relationships. And I think, this is where virtual spaces can be good for folks, you know? So like for some folks, finding some virtual support groups, virtual spaces can be like a low-hanging fruit. Community can be 1 or 2 people, right? And we have to be very intentional about it, right? Who's one person you know, or is there a coffee shop nearby that has a good vibe? Go there, take a book, you know, sit there for a little while. So I always invite people to really think about their own ecosystem, and what's a doorway into and the other thing I say to people is everybody wants it. Like we can be shy, we can be introverts. Everybody is craving community. So if you just start with this premise that like everybody's desperate for community, what is one step you can take? And it really starts with finding one person. And sometimes it's being vulnerable, asking for help. And sometimes it's offering help. Those are great doorways in, right? Oh, you know, I have a client who has a sick kiddo and she's very shy to reach out for support. And she kind of did a little post online and one person in our community responded, here are the things I can do to support you, you know? And I said to her, I said, you know, you just sharing what you're going through is going to allow other people to support you. And people feel good when they can do that. And then you can start to build community.
It's that moment of like that vulnerability, putting yourself out there. And if it's ever shut down, continuously doing that. A lot of us are just scared to take that extra step. I know a lot of men are.
Yeah.
So building that community. And what was that book again?
How We Show Up by Mia Birdsong.
Beautiful.
It's a beautiful book.
I have a question. There's a lot of therapists who listen to the show
Mm.
and they go, I'm really interested in this work. I'm not necessarily certified, but I'm going into the Integrative Psych Institute certification. But right now, what are some ways that maybe these practitioners or therapists just in general, how can they implement these somatic wilding techniques into their programs or their just approach?
Yeah. And I work with a lot of people that were trained in one way, and then they're trying to figure out, how do I start integrating this? So I get this
Yeah.
question a lot. So the first is, do the practices yourself. Get it into your own body, right? Whether you're doing breath work or yoga or physical, energetic healing stuff or somatics, the first thing is to start embodying it. I teach these tools to school teachers as well, right? So once you've experienced the power of simply pushing your feet down into the ground and noticing that you then take a deep breath and settle, then it's going to feel more organic to say to somebody, hey, you want to try something? Just try feeling your feet on the floor for a moment. Notice if that brings your breath to you, right? So simple tools. And what I often say to especially therapists who've been working a particular way is to say to the client, if you're open, there's a few new tools I want to share with you. And so then saying, you're talking about this thing and I'm just noticing that you're not breathing and you're kind of getting red. Would you be open to just like trying something? So it's a little bit more explicit, right? As people get more training, they can start tracking bodies, right?
Yeah.
So there's this next level where they're tracking bodies, and then they are kind of saying, hey, hold up a moment. Like, what did that feel like in your body? That might be a bit much if somebody doesn't have sort of the background in the training, but simply offering somatic tools and even saying to clients, like, I'm learning so much about what's happening in our nervous system. And so I might offer you some practices to settle when I notice that a lot of emotion is coming up, if you think that's useful.
Mm. And always us embodying it first.
Yeah.
And will the client or the patient know or feel if you're
Yeah.
not embodying it?
Yeah. I think it's like, it can come off so disingenuous. But even more importantly, when we are embodying it, that will impact our clients, even if we're not doing any other intervention.
That's right.
Right? Because they're going to feel, I mean, look, some people that don't have this training are naturally very grounded and regulated, and they're creating that resonance, right? And the more that we're doing it, the deeper impact we're going to have, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And when, let's say I've been doing my at-home practices, Hala said to feel my feet, and I was feeling my knees, and I'm really present, and I'm breathing, and I'm starting to, I feel something coming up, and I'm going through that process. Is it the same practice? I can say, hey, are you open to trying this new thing? And are we just having them do like some sort of somatic meditation? How does something like that look for the practitioners?
Mm-hmm. I think it looks different for everybody. There isn't like a one size fits all, but I love the tool of grounding. So teaching people how to, whether it's feel their feet on the floor or your back against the chair, right? Like even folks listening can just, even in the position you're sitting in, like starting to sense all the ways where your body is being supported. And that can be a good way to have people start to notice and settle. But grounding isn't settling for everybody, right? There's so many different tools. Everybody's nervous system responds differently. And so I always make sure when I'm working with clients to say, like, we're going to try a few things. You tell me what feels settling in your nervous system, right?
I
Because
see.
we want them to notice what works for them and what doesn't.
Yeah, and they
Yeah.
can take that home,
Yeah.
because like we were thinking not everyone has to or has the access to being in the community and drums hitting and
Yeah.
and sounds and dancing,
Yeah.
right? So just being able to lean into what feels good for them, what do they feel safe in doing,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I love that earlier you said singing, and the vocal, like
Yes.
getting in the car. Do you know how many clients of mine I said I have them sing, but like from the belly, like
Mm-hmm.
actually their real voice to actually feel how powerful they are
Yeah.
when they sing.
Mm.
So many of them goes, I broke down crying. I had to pull the car over because I couldn't believe I was having an emotional release
Yes.
just from, can you believe like that, just singing the power of
Oh.
of one's voice and actually really hearing, yes, I can be big, I can be seen, I have no shame behind this. Whoa, that's really
It's so
therapeutic.
powerful. I mean, I think I used to teach with a colleague who was a voice teacher, so I'd always watch her bring the group into voice work. And I would say to her, like, I always have to sit in the sidelines because if I actually participate, I'm always having my own emotional release.
Yeah, yeah,
But I'm
that's
trying to be
true.
the teacher, like I can't get
That's
around
true.
it, I think voice work, I mean, when we think about just even the vagus nerve and vagal tone,
Yeah.
but also all the ways that our trauma is around not being able to speak our truth and the
Mhm.
ways we shut our voices down, like, oh, voice is like the final frontier.
It is the final frontier.
I
And
think
for me,
so.
the one of the biggest blocks to really, really expressing what's in there, because
Yeah.
how many times when we were kids, they said, oh, no, stop crying, or
Yeah.
no, you're being too loud.
Yep.
And,
Yep.
we're sucking it in. And so many times when we just wanted to,
Yeah.
just be primal and let that sound
Yeah.
out. I love the movement thing.
Mhm.
I love connecting with like fascia, even though we can't see it.
Mhm.
It's in our body. And I do think that if we have intention around just bringing awareness to it, it really activates. So when I have music on, I'll say, how does my fascia, not Christian, want to move?
Oh, I love
And I'm
that.
contorting and distorting. And sometimes I look like a Cirque du Soleil, like one of those. And then I feel like, whoa, like I feel this wave of emotion sometimes coming up. I go, I didn't even feel so. Oh my God, I'm going to cry. And then there's just movement coming up.
Yes.
And then not only that, my body feels like I just did a yoga class.
Mhm.
It just feels so open. And it's like, thank you, I needed this. But we knew how to do that.
Yeah.
We knew what we needed.
Oh, yeah.
And the one thing I would like to say about that is when we're in community, I think that there's a cumulative energy that gives, there's something about one person giving permission. There's something about 20 people in the
Yeah.
same resonance giving permission. There's a collective nervous system healing.
Oh,
I think
yes.
everything's attuned together.
Absolutely. I think there's a word from that called entrainment, right?
That's
That
it.
when we are together, our nervous systems, they entrain, they connect,
Oof.
we tap into this like bigger thing, right? And it's so powerful.
That's the most healing thing. That's the most healing thing. More entrainment opportunities. Get your most open-minded, weirdest friends together.
That's right.
And start training together collectively with an experience.
Oh, yeah.
And I love that we have that information on that. So when the practitioner starts getting into the somatics, there might be a learning curve or something like that. But over time, their practice gets more honed in. What is the difference between someone just coming in and actually like their heart's in it, they want to really help, and they start unfolding and getting this process for themselves, versus someone who's been doing it a while? Is it that the patients get better faster, or there's more impactful, potent changes right there? Like what happens when someone becomes more seasoned in this work?
I think that the biggest change is we have more experience in any methodology, right? But with somatics is number one, our own maturity level. So I know when I first started doing this work, I felt like I needed to help people really quickly. And it was coming out of like my own need to feel useful. So there's our own maturing process, although some people are already mature and they've been working with folks for a long time and they're adding somatics into their practice. I don't know. I wish I could say like, when you've been doing it a long time, you heal people in one session. Like, no, like, I think that the more mature we get at holding space for healing, the more that we can really start to see our client for who they are and not through the lens of like our own stuff or who we want them to be. I think that we also can get more skillful at reading their nervous system and not confusing what's happening inside of us
That's
with
right.
what's happening inside
Mhm.
of them. And I think that we can get more skillful in letting go of our own agenda and like really looking for the intelligence of that nervous system and of that body. And the last thing I will say is also understanding that sometimes healing is not cure. Sometimes people don't get cured. But all this healing stuff is happening. Their soul is growing, and maybe their neck still hurts, but their relationships got better, right?
Yeah.
So how do we look for, sometimes the client has a particular thing they want healed. How are we also seeing the other things that might be happening for them?
And now from the patient or the client side, what are the signs that, hey, this process that I'm going through is actually working?
I mean, usually what I say is it's relational. How are your relationships, right? But I think we have to look at what is causing this person suffering, right? Are they coming in with physical pain? Are their relationships toxic? Do they feel stuck in their purpose? So on some level, I always like to have the client guide. What is it that they are looking for? And let me support that, the health in that. I think that ultimately a sign that somatics is working is people feel more integrated. They feel more congruent with themselves, right? That my life, my external life is a reflection of my own purpose, my own values, what I want. I'm able to be consistent, that they feel more grounded in their lives. They don't feel like life is happening to them, but they are agents in their life. They have agency and self-determination. And I think that generosity is a big one. Are we able to be more generous with people? That people who are suffering are very narcissistic because we get so obsessed with our suffering because we're trying to get better, right? But it's very hard to think about others. But I think, this feeling of our life being congruent and in alignment with who we want to be and feeling enough of a sense of control and self-determination.
Yeah. And what a beautiful way to live when actually you're in alignment with what is flowing out of you. It's like that's when life really changes because it brings forth this happiness because you're more authentic to what is happening on the inside and actually less fear of being judged for whatever you're embodying, and going through your process. So there are these markers of and thank you for sharing that.
And I really need to name, and we'll see if we keep this, we are in a state politically where people's lives are on the line, right? And so sometimes when I talk about this stuff, I really want to think about people whose lives are being threatened with deportation and with violence, right? And so to be really careful to remember that when we are in an active trauma response, it is not that we're unhealthy or unhealed if we are in these stress responses, right?
Right.
That is an appropriate reaction, right? And so as I think about our sociopolitical landscape right now, those of us that have the privilege to be able to be okay, we need to be okay because there's going to be so many people that do not have space for this and their lives are on the line and we've got to mobilize to surround them and protect them.
Before we wrap this up, I'm thinking to myself how much work you've done with the Institute and really building up the cohort and understanding. What would you say is not only just our students, but just in general, the biggest obstacle to people dropping into their body and getting into that somatic healing? And how can people viewing or listening or students of our program, how can they really, really overcome that hurdle themselves?
Gosh, there's so many obstacles. I have to pick one.
The biggest one.
I think it's our fear or inability to be uncomfortable. And somehow the messaging we get that we need to always be comfortable at any cost. And so if we can stop avoiding being uncomfortable and think about what kind of discomfort we might move towards, just rejiggering that. Because I think if we're always looking for comfort, we're going to be doing a lot of dissociation, right? A lot of things that disconnect us from the moment. So if we can just stick with a moment where we notice we want to pull out our phone or we want to react or we want to drink or whatever, if we can just hang out for a moment with that discomfort, sometimes that becomes a doorway into our transformation.
Just a moment. Just a moment of getting out of that routine, the thing we numb ourselves with or that we're on autopilot about. That's what our body's asking for. Just a moment to feel.
Just a moment to feel. Just slow it down if you can.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to, don't expect that one moment to be everything. No. But if you keep doing that.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Hala, where can people find you, learn more about you, any upcoming things you have, just any information?
Yeah. My website, which is just my name, halakhouri.com, and teaching with the Psych Institute. I know we have some new cohorts coming up. And right now that's about it. Most of my work I'm doing kind of in the private sector, but I've got some things brewing. And so folks can find me on Instagram at Hala Khouri Somatics.
That's right. Hala Khouri, you go check it out. Go look at her work. One of the finest somatic teachers I know, heart-centric and truly, truly passionate about this work. Thank you, Hala, for coming.
Thank you for having me.